Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Kaiya. Today we're going to be ranking Metallica albums, which I'm very excited to do. This video is following up my Metallica deep dive that I just recently posted. So if you haven't seen that video, feel free to watch it after this tier list video. Metallica really doesn't need any sort of introduction, so let's just get started with their debut album from 1983, Kill 'Em All. Kill 'Em All, I think, is a very solid debut album. This, of course, is OG Metallica, their kind of thrash crossover sound. There's some very solid tracks off of this record. You have the Four Horsemen, which I really loved, Jump in the Fire, and of course Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth, which I mentioned in my deep dive is one of my favorite songs off of this record. I just think that this is just quintessential Metallica, and for how young they were, it's really impressive that they were able to record an album that was as punchy and raw and thrashy as this debut. So I definitely see myself coming back to this album over and over again. I'm putting it in S tier, where it really belongs. And so we get into their sophomore album next, Ride the Lightning, from 1984. I'm obsessed with the album cover, and I think this album is honestly stronger than their debut album, which is of course what you want. You want a band's like sophomore record, third, fourth album to be stronger than their debut, at least in my opinion, and I think that they succeeded with Ride the Lightning. This album has so many amazing songs on it, but of course my favorite is Fade to Black. I just think this record in particular has so much replay value for me, and I could definitely see myself going back to this over and over and over again, specifically just to jam, you know, The Call of Cthulhu, Creeping Death, and Fade to Black. Like, it's a banger through and through. I'm absolutely putting Ride the Lightning in S tier. So now let's get into their third album. This is, of course, Master of Puppets from 1986. A lot of y'all in the comments said that this was your absolute favorite album, or at least in your top 5. This is a classic record. Favorite tracks off of this record are definitely Battery, Orion, which did take a few listens to become one of my favorites, but I do like that. I think Master of Puppets, the title track too, is pretty solid. The guitar solo is to die for. But I do think that this record is just a little overrated. So I am going to put Master of Puppets in A tier. I just see myself listening to their first 2 albums more than I see myself coming back to Master of Puppets, just because, you know, Ride the Lightning, Fade to Black is right there, girl, for me. So Master of Puppets, you're still like in my top 5, but there are other albums in Metallica's discography that are just better in my opinion. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is, of course, the 1988 record, And Justice for All. Now, so many of you said that And Justice for All was by far your favorite album, or at least it was in your top 5, and y'all were grilling me because of my rating for And Justice for All. And I'm just gonna say, music is subjective. There is no right or wrong opinion when it comes to music, and that includes Metallica, girl. Okay, so you can take some of your sassiness and shove it up your butthole, okay? I don't want any of it. Now, this record, And Justice for All, in my opinion, I think it's a bloated, hot mess of a record. It's just not for me. I think Ride the Lightning is far superior. I think Kill 'Em All is far superior, in my opinion. It's just got, those 2 albums have so much replay value, and this record, I do not see myself coming back to it anytime soon. I really like the tracks To Live Is to Die, and I like the track 1, and that's it for me. So there are 2 songs, those 2, that I would come back to just to listen to those, but I would not see myself sitting down and listening to this in its entirety for a while. So, And Justice for All, I think you're a B. You're in B tier, so you're not hot garbage, okay? You're just bloated and overrated. Now we're gonna get into the Black Album from 1991. I absolutely love this album, and it is, of course, going in S tier. This record is by far one of my favorite albums. It is battling with Ride the Lightning for number one. They're like right neck and neck, girl. Ride the Lightning and the Black Album are so good. I mean, you have banger tracks like Enter Sandman, Sad But True, The Unforgiven. Like, Fade to Black and Unforgiven are just everything I want from Metallica and so much more. The only flop on this record for me was A Wolf and Man. Everything else was solid. And, you know, to have a record that's like 11 out of 12 songs are bangers is really, really good. Like, it's very rare that, you know, you get albums that are like 10 out of 10, all the songs are bangers, you know. And you know, the Black Album is right there. There's only one song that's a flop for me, but I think it's right up there in S tier with Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. And so we get into the sister albums, Load and Reload. These are obviously from the late 90s. Now, Load is not a terrible record. It's just not usual Metallica sound. So you cannot approach these sister albums like you would Kill 'Em All or Ride the Lightning. You can't even approach Load and Reload like you would the Black Album, because they're just exploring a completely different musical genre. You know, you've got the hard rock, southern rock, blues, twang in this entire album. It's not terrible music. It's just different. And while I can appreciate their experimentation with both of these records, I don't see myself realistically coming back to listen to them. But they're not awful by any means. But they're just not super great. So Load, I think, is better than Reload, which is why I'm putting it in B tier next to And Justice for All. I would come back to Load more than I would Reload, its sister record. I think Reload I'm going to put in C tier because I think it suffers from really cringy, bad songwriting, in my personal opinion, and just it lacks in a lot of areas for me in comparison to Load. So I can appreciate the experimentation, but it's just not something I see myself realistically coming back to listen to in its entirety. Now, Garage Inc. is technically not a Metallica album, but it kind of is. It's a cover record, right? It's a cover album, and there are some amazing songs on here that they covered. Of course, you have Black Sabbath, you've got the Misfits, Merciful Fate, Blue Oyster Cult, just banger after banger. This album is fire for a Metallica cover album, and honestly very refreshing to listen to after listening to Load and Reload. So I really, really liked that Metallica came back to their heaviness, and I genuinely think that Garage Inc. is A tier. You know, even though the music is not original, the style that they're playing on this record is heavy, it's punchy, it's everything that you would want with old school Metallica on this record, and I think it's really, really executed well. So I like the Garage Inc. album. And now we're going to get into Saint Anger. Now, Saint Anger is definitely a polarizing album from 2003. A lot of people have very mixed opinions about this record for all of the obvious reasons. One of them, of course, being the snare. For me personally, the snare is very distracting as a listener. This is Metallica's take on nu metal. Some people in the comments of my deep dive were saying that this was Metallica's take on like hardcore or punk. I kind of think that they're experimenting more with like grunge and that kind of early 2000s teenage angst music. You know, that's kind of the vibe that I get. And I've never really been into grunge necessarily. I've never really been into that early 2000s kind of rock, really, if ever. Like Purify, I can hear that song in my head right now. Purify, electrified, like, and I'm gonna tell you right now, I had that song stuck in my head for like 2 weeks while I was editing this deep dive, and it was pain, but it was kind of a banger, but it was also pain. So I don't know. Saint Anger though, I am gonna put you in D tier just because for me personally, I don't see myself coming back to this ever. Now, Death Magnetic, if Metallica had an underrated album, it would be Death Magnetic. I really don't hear anybody ever talk about this record from 2008, and I don't know why. Death Magnetic is really, really solid. Some people in the comments were saying that this was like the last Metallica album that they listened to, and then they checked out. This is a very strong album. They brought their heaviness back. I think a lot of people checked out, honestly, from listening to Metallica after they released not only the Black Album, but definitely Load, Reload, and then, of course, Saint Anger. And then I think people checked back in when they released Death Magnetic. This is a very strong record. Now, that being said, I know there were some complaints about Rick Rubin's production on this record. He's kind of known for creating this, like, wall of sound. So this is a very loud record, at least with some of the reviews, some of the comments. Riffage. It's a fire album. Underrated, in my opinion. If any Metallica could be underrated, I just don't hear anybody talking about Death Magnetic, and it's right up there with the Black Album, Ride the Lightning, and Kill 'Em All. I just think it's fantastic. And then we have Lulu. Now, Lulu is technically not a Metallica album, right? It's Lou Reed with Metallica backing him. And so if you're looking at this record as a Lou Reed album, it makes perfect sense, and I would probably rate it as like a 5 or a 6 out of 10 for Lou Reed. I'm not a fan of the Velvet Underground or really Lou Reed. I'm not a fan of what Lou Reed does on Lulu. Now, that being said, there are some hidden gems on this record, which I didn't mention in my deep dive, but like the last song on the album, which I'm just going to be honest, I don't remember the name, but it's like a 20-minute track. It's not terrible. It's kind of a vibe. Like the last 10 minutes are instrumental, and it's very chill and ambient, and just like it's a vibe. But as a Metallica album, Lulu is D tier for sure. It's just, it doesn't make sense. It's a very odd collaboration. Like, I get it, but I don't get it, you know? And also, I mentioned in my deep dive, too, that what Metallica is playing on Lulu is really good. Like, if you take the time to listen to the instrumentation on that record and what they're doing with the guitar work and everything, it's just some of the riffs, man, that they tracked for Lulu are really, really good, and it's just a wasted opportunity in my opinion. I feel like I wish I could hear those albums with like the full force of Metallica behind them. But yeah, I really don't think I will ever return to Lulu except for maybe that last song, but we'll see. So now let's talk about Hardwired to Self-Destruct from 2016. This record, I feel like a lot of people did enjoy. I think that this record is fun. I think it's fine. Not the most memorable. I think Death Magnetic is more fun and more riff heavy for me, but this is not an offensive album. I mean, honestly, looking at these tracks, I really don't remember anything about this record. Nothing stands out. I'm just being totally real. So, you know, I think that that's just something to take away. I just don't think that it stood out enough for my brain to really remember it. Because, like, I remember having an absolute blast with Death Magnetic. Now, that being said, I do remember enjoying this, but I don't remember any tracks except for, like, Atlas Rise. So I would put Hardwired in A tier. I do remember it being fun. It's not as good as Death Magnetic, I will say. I'm gonna be honest and say 72 Seasons is gonna go in C tier. I just think it's not great. My biggest complaint with 72 Seasons is I feel like this record lacks so much passion and energy and just soul, and it feels very soulless, and it doesn't feel very genuine in my opinion. From the AI music videos that they used to just like the repetitiveness of many of the tracks, Kirk Hammett looks bored. Like, they just look bored, and they look like they're just paid to be there, which, I mean, I guess they are, but 72 Seasons just lacks the edge that Metallica brought with Hardwired and with what they brought with Death Magnetic. If we're talking like modern Metallica albums, like, we know that Metallica can bring the energy, bring the heaviness, you know? And I'm not expecting Metallica to bring, you know, the edge that they had from Ride the Lightning into 72 Seasons. It's too much time has gone by, and they're much older now, so, and that's okay. You know, I'm not expecting that from them, but I'm at least expecting some sort of energy, some sort of passion, something that at least makes me feel something in the music, and I just don't, unfortunately. Now, that being said, the Inamorata song at the end, I thought was actually pretty decent. I didn't mind that, and then of course, I have to mention their single, If Darkness Had a Sun. That song still is like, gets stuck in my head. I don't know whether it's just like, you know, a meme thing, or like my autistic brain just being like, if darkness had, like, I just sing it in the shower sometimes, and then it'll be stuck in my head for 3 days, and then it's gone. So, I mean, I guess you could say that those two songs are my favorite. I don't know. Definitely Inamorata, though, is for sure a favorite of mine. So otherwise, it just is a little soulless and bloated for me. So that's gonna do it for today's tier list, ranking all of Metallica's albums. I really hope that you enjoyed. Now, in my Metallica deep dive, I did ask y'all what your top 5 Metallica albums were, but in this video, I'm going to ask you, if you were gonna be trapped on an island and you could only bring one Metallica album, not 2, not 3, but just one single album, what Metallica record would it be? I think I would pick the Black Album, but just knowing me, I'm very indecisive, so I would definitely be staring at like Ride the Lightning and the Black Album, being like, So I really hope you enjoyed. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, you guys.